Hello, welcome to another President's Message. It is November 2024. We're accelerating close to the end of the year here. I have a special treat for you today. My guest is not a NAPO member. That's unusual in and of itself. So I am so pleased to welcome Carrie Lane to the President's Recording for this month. Carrie recently wrote a book, and the title of that book is More Than Pretty Boxes: How the Rise of Professional Organizing Shows Us the Way We Work Isn't Working. So Carrie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And I am excited to say that I actually am a NAPO affiliate now.
That's
I'm an
right. You are
affiliated
a
member of
member
NAPO now.
now.
Yes.
I
Yep.
misspoke. That is right. So I remember meeting you vividly, remember meeting you at our Long Beach summit. And it was so fascinating to hear sort of your origin story of like how you came to be doing this work. But really quickly, before we get into the book itself, just tell everybody, who you are, what you're doing, where you're located. What do we need to know about you?
Sure, I would love to. I'm a professor of American Studies, and my background is actually a combination of studying American history and anthropology. So I'm an anthropologist, but I study the United States, and I specialize in the study of work. So my previous research projects have been about white collar work and unemployment, and I'm just really interested in how work is changing in contemporary America, the ways in which work is really shifting. So that's sort of my background. And I teach at California State University, Fullerton. This is my 20th year there, and I live in Los Angeles.
Amazing. Wow, that's so cool. And so I feel like I want to like save some of these tidbits for the surprise, but I'm sure everyone's curious to know what drew you in the course of your work, what drew you to study organizers?
So it actually started when I was clearing out mugs from my cabinet one day. And we all have too many mugs, I think. And I was sorting through and taking a few out to donate. And I just felt so virtuous and proud of myself that I was clearing out clutter and that, I just felt wonderful. And as a cultural critic, my first thought was, oh, where is this coming from? Like, what's the connection for me between three fewer mugs and a better person living a better life? And that was when I realized, okay, there's something in the cultural ether around being organized, around decluttering that is worth studying. And so I decided I was going to study sort of the rise of the simple living movement and real simple and container store and professional organizing. It was going to be kind of a combo. And then I should have known better. I know myself. Work is what interests me most. So as soon as I started interviewing organizers, I said, okay, forget it. Forget the rest of that stuff. And actually, luckily, there have been some other scholars who did great work on the history of decluttering and organization. And I got to focus entirely on professional organizers because I just found the work so interesting. And after I did two interviews, I was hooked and I had to do more and get to know this fascinating world of professional organizing better.
And you actually worked shoulder to shoulder with organizers in the field, right?
I did. I worked more than 100 hours as an unpaid organizing assistant to organizers in Los Angeles and Orange County.
Oh my gosh. And the book is such an amazing glimpse into like it's not every day that you are afforded the opportunity of having someone who is truly an observer on an organizing project, right? And those of us who are doing the work, we've got a million things in our head. We're trying to manage the project, we're trying to manage the client's experience, we're trying to move the project towards its goals. And it was so interesting reading some of the case studies that you shared in the book about like what you were witnessing, what coming up for the clients as a course of their decluttering process. Um, and of course, all the insights that you built around organizers ourselves. So, what's the most interesting thing that you learned about professional organizing?
Hmm. I would say it was learning how wrong some of my preconceptions were. So a lot of what I knew about organizing was based on TV and magazines. And this is not news to any professional organizer out there, but they do not accurately represent often what the organizing process looks like. And so I think I kind of came into it thinking that organizers were like the human equivalent of Real Simple Magazine and the Container Store, that they were sort of creating and enforcing these really high expectations of what our homes were supposed to look like, of how decluttered we were supposed to be. And as soon as I talked with actual organizers and worked alongside them, it became clear that I think organizing is actually the opposite of that. That so many of the organizers that I met and worked alongside, they were trying to disabuse their clients of these really unrealistic, harsh expectations they had about themselves and about how their homes were supposed to look, how their pantries were supposed to look, that they were supposed to be like a magazine spread. And instead, organizing really is, as organizers told me, it's not about the stuff, right? It's about the people. It's about empathy and connection and non-judgment. It's about teaching more than it's about doing. So I think for me, that was the most fascinating side, to just see how wrong I think pop culture has it about what organizing
Mhm.
looks like, and how much more interesting and important I think the work of real life organizers is than TV would lead us to believe.
And so, as someone who is not actually an organizer, what was the hardest or best part about working as an assistant on organizing jobs?
I mean, there were so many best parts. I couldn't pick one. I really just, I loved it. I found it fascinating. I think the hardest part was, and again, this is not news to organizers, being really organized, which I am. Being really organized and being a good organizer are not the same thing, right? So that sometimes those of us who are very organized ourselves do not have a lot of patience for
Mhm.
other people's disorganization. And so the nobility of organizers spending their entire days in disorganized spaces, and the patience and the empathy part, I like to think of myself as an empathetic person, and yet I found myself often thinking, just get rid of the mugs, just get rid of the mugs, or just get rid of the boxes, or just throw it all out. And of course I never said that, but just watching organizers, that wasn't their goal. That getting rid of stuff was not their priority, and they were never going to make anybody get rid of anything. Um, that that they had a different kind of objective, one that was actually much more important than my sort of anxiety laden desire to get rid of stuff.
I say that all the time. I've been doing this work 20 years and I have a team in my company, Abundance Organizing. So I interview prospective organizers all the time. And there's a vast difference between someone who likes to organize or who is organized and someone who can do this as a living professionally for other people, right? It's just a
Yeah.
totally different experience. You have to be able to transcend the mess, and come up with ideas and work with the client and meet them where they are. And it's often a harsh reality when people think that this is a job that they want to do, and then they realize it's not at all what they thought. So I can share, Carrie was so generous to ask me to write a little blurb for her book cover, which I did gladly. And I remember saying in my remarks that I think this book is required reading for not only for anyone who's operating in the organizing profession, because it is really an interesting look at a more global perspective of what's going on in our industry, but also anyone who is a prospective organizer who is considering coming into this profession, like absolutely 100% recommend your book, that it would give them amazing insight into what it really is like.
Well, thank you. That is incredibly generous of you. And I would love for organizers to read the book and tell me their thoughts as well, right? Because you are the experts on professional organizing. I'm just the one who had the luxury of getting to talk to so many organizers over a long period of time.
Yes. And so real quickly, tell us about the book itself. I know the title says, the rise of professional organizing shows us the way that we work isn't working. So can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. I think it's kind of, the book is organized into two parts. And one part is really more about the history of professional organizing. And I had the wonderful honor of interviewing four of the five founders of NAPO. And so that was just incredible.
Wow.
And it's the history of professional organizing, how it grew, where it grew, who grew it, the challenges they faced, and what continues to draw people, especially women, to the field of professional organizing. So the first half is sort of what's going on with other forms of employment that makes organizing such an alluring option for so many people. And I think that has to do with the ways in which standard employment doesn't offer the kind of flexibility and meaningful work and control over one's own working hours and work assignments and how we approach our work. So I think if you look at the people who are choosing professional organizing and why they're choosing it, I think there's a critique underneath there of the other kinds of jobs available to them that are less attractive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe the way in which just rising insecurity and precarious work in general has made entrepreneurship seem less risky than before, because so-called secure employment isn't all that secure anymore anyway, right? So it makes starting your own business a little less risky in comparison. So that's the first half, is like how problems with typical employment have created the rise of this kind of field. And then the second half is more about the work organizers actually do, not just why they moved into the field. But if you go into an organizing session, like I did as an observer or a participant observer, what is it that's drawing people to hire organizers, and what does the labor of organizers actually include? And there, where I see the connection to the problems with how we're working and living in contemporary America today, is that I think so much of the demand for organizing stems not just from overconsumption. That's part of it, and that's an easy answer. We hear that a lot, but really from overwork and overwhelm from so many households not having the luxury of having a dedicated homemaker who has the time and energy to contribute to running the household. So you have a lot of people stretched really thin. I think technologies are allowing our work to creep even more into our lives outside of work, creating less time. And then just the onslaught of information and responsibilities that we have, right? There's a section of the book where I talk about what my mom had to do to enroll me in kindergarten and what I had to do to enroll my son in
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten 40 years later. And
Vastly different.
the difference is overwhelming. There's so many apps, so many websites, so many forms, just that we're asked to do so much. And the reason people are feeling overwhelmed is not because there's some moral failing in them, not because they're not as capable as somebody else, but because there genuinely is it's too much stuff for us all to do, too little time in which to do it. And then these layers of insecurity and uncertainty and self-blame and self-criticism all layered on top there. And that's what's getting tackled through professional organizing, in addition to the stuff in the spaces themselves, I think. So that's the bigger story about work that I think organizing is just an amazing lens to get into.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely agree. And your book definitely dispels a lot of myths, which is wonderful as well. So I'm excited to let everyone who's watching know that if this conversation is interesting to you, this is just really a teaser, because we're so fortunate. Carrie is going to be joining us at our summit in Chicago in March. And she is going to join me on stage, on the main stage, and we're going to be having a conversation really as an extension of this one, talking about the book, talking about her insight. And we're really, really excited to sort of shout this message from the rafters and to welcome you into our community.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, this book wouldn't exist if it were not for the generosity of professional organizers and of NAPO national and some regional chapters who really allowed me to come in and to explore your fascinating industry and shared your insights and allowed me to work alongside you, even though I'm not necessarily the most talented organizing assistant in the world. So I am just so excited to be able to participate in the NAPO Summit and spend more time with the organizing community that I have just grown to really love and respect.
Well, and we will have you set up with an author's table as well. So Carrie will be there, her book will be there, and we'll be talking a lot more about it. So I'm really excited to continue the conversation in March. I think our main stage moment is on the 27th. So that's, again, it's at Summit in Chicago. But thank you for taking the time to join me here today. And we will see you in a couple months.
It was my pleasure. That sounds great.
For anyone who wants to find the book, where can they find it?
So it's available on Amazon, and it's available also through University of Chicago Press. It's available for pre-order now, and it'll be coming out I think it's November 24th officially. So in late November.
Okay. All right. Well, again, and of course, you will have an opportunity to pick up a copy of the book if at Summit, if you don't have it before then. But the book again is called More Than Pretty Boxes: How the Rise of Professional Organizing Shows Us the Way We Work Isn't Working. And thank you especially to my guest, Carrie Lane.